What is up, guys? Dzeeff here, and welcome back to yet another episode where we look at anime characters and the cards that they used and talk about if those same cards saw play in the actual Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG format. Now, we're talking about Jaden in today's video, and I have to say here, Jaden played a ton of cards. A lot of bad cards, but also a lot of really good cards, so today's video is going to be a little bit longer than some of the previous episodes. I also, once again, want to stress here that we are not talking about the manga cards, we are only talking about the anime cards, because honestly, if we talked about the manga cards, this video would probably be like an hour long. And as always with this series, please remember we're not talking about how good the cards were in the anime, we're just talking about their power level in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. But first, let me tell you about today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. NordVPN is a powerful virtual private network that keeps users safe when browsing online, anywhere and anytime on all devices. Using a VPN while browsing online increases your privacy and security by hiding your IP address and virtual location. All of your online traffic is routed through a remote server so that you can access content that you otherwise might not have access to. For example, if you've been looking for a show or movie on Netflix that you can't seem to find, you can use NordVPN to change your virtual location so you can watch it. When I use my Netflix connected in the United States, normally I can't watch Deadpool, but if I connect it to the United Kingdom, now I can watch it with no issues. They have more than 5,000 super fast servers in 59 countries, no data logging, and 24/7 customer support. Right now, NordVPN has a special Christmas deal where the 2-year plan is 68% off. That is ridiculous, and you even get 4 free months on top of that whenever you purchase a 2-year plan. If you're interested in checking out NordVPN, which you should be, go to nordvpn.com/Dzeeff and use coupon code Dzeeff at the checkout. Thank you, NordVPN, for sponsoring today's video. Like many anime characters, Jaden used a lot of old school power spells like Monster Reborn and Pot of Greed, but where Jaden really differs is that he also used Mirage of Nightmare. So this card is really cool. It can give you a lot of advantage. It was good back when it was legal way back in the day, but what was especially interesting about Jaden using this card is that he did the actual combo for the most part. So one of the ways that you can cheese out a lot of advantage with Mirage of Nightmare is that you will destroy it before you actually would have to discard. So in the case of the TCG, a lot of times we would see people destroy their own Mirage of Nightmare with cards like MST, and Jaden actually used emergency provisions to send it to the graveyard to avoid the discarding, which is pretty cool. Jaden also used Card Trooper, a fantastic level 3 monster that mills cards and potentially gives you a free draw. Back in the day when Card Trooper was first released, it was a very expensive ultra rare, but nowadays we don't see this card too often. However, it was very good in tons of different formats, and one of the best uses for it was summoning multiple copies with machine duplication, boosting them all to 1900 while milling 9 cards to the graveyard, and yeah, that was a really good combo. That combo was called Troop Dupe Scoop, and it was very popular. It topped a ton of events, but also Card Trooper just saw play over the years as a really good normal summon on turn 1 back in the day. In the same set that we got that original ultra rare Card Trooper that was very expensive, we also got Burial from a Different Dimension, the other ultra rare in that smaller set, and this card was fantastic for a long time. You can even sometimes see people playing it nowadays in decks like Zombies or potentially even Infernoids. It's just a good way to recycle cards that you banished, and there are a lot of cards that banish themselves as like a drawback, and Burial can put them right back into the graveyard. Of course, I'm going to talk about some of the elemental hero cards that Jaden used. I do want to clarify here that many of the elemental hero cards that Jaden used in the anime were not very good in the TCG. A lot of them were way too situational, the fusion monsters didn't do that much, but some of them did see play, and I will mention that in the manga there are a ton of hero cards that Jaden used that did see play in the TCG, but we don't have time to talk about all of those. Maybe if there's enough requests for it, we can make a video about only the manga hero cards, because there were a lot of really good ones that saw play in the TCG. Anyway, Jaden in the anime did at least use Elemental Hero Bubbleman, a fantastic level 4 E-Hero monster that can special summon itself for free. The anime version was a lot more broken, but the TCG version actually did see tons of play. You could special summon it for free, make rank 4 monsters, and then maybe use it for fusion material while in the graveyard with a card we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Overall, Elemental Hero Bubbleman was a great E-Hero monster, and it was one of the earliest ones released in the TCG format. Many of the other E-Hero monsters were not very good in the TCG format, at least from what Jaden played in the anime. The normals, for example, were not very good. Blade Edge and Wildheart weren't super impactful, but Bubbleman in particular was a really great card. I will say the one time that the normals actually did see a tiny bit of success was in a deck that had to play them to summon Elemental Hero Electrum. This was a deck that was capable of performing an FTK with Chain Material and Fusion Gate, and this was a card that requires you to play those types of normal monsters. Still, they weren't very good. They were just played as a way to summon this one card, so for the most part they were not very popular, and honestly this particular deck only had success like one time. It was not the most common variant of the E-Hero deck. We also saw Elemental Hero Prisma in a ton of Gladiator Beast decks, and those decks were very popular for a long time. This was one of the best cards to open. You would play Rhoda to get to it, you would play Stratos to get to it. This was one of the best cards in that deck in combination with cards like Test Tiger. Prisma was a mainstay in competition in pretty much any format where gladiators were seeing play, so it's definitely a card that I wanted to highlight in today's discussion. Jaden also played E Emergency Call, which is pretty unsurprising. It's one of the cards that spells hero, and this is a card that saw tons of play over the years. Even right now, it is currently seeing play in pretty much every single hero deck, and for a good reason. Back in the day, we did not have that many searching cards, which means that this thing was pretty appealing for a lot of players. It gave you extra consistency in whatever hero deck you decided to play. E-Emergency Call, yes, can only search elemental heroes, but because this card can grab Stratos, and Stratos can search any hero monster, it's almost like E-Emergency Call can search any hero monster. While he might have not been able to summon cards like the Shining or Absolute Zero in the anime at least, Jaden did still play Miracle Fusion, a great card that lets you summon a fusion monster by banishing monsters in your graveyard or on your side of the field. Miracle Fusion was a mainstay in hero decks for a long time. It was great in the older school hero decks, and it's one of the better fusion support cards that we've ever seen for an archetype. Plenty of decks have a Miracle Fusion type card, but in a hero deck, this card is so flexible and so good that it's really worth highlighting as one of the best hero support cards in the entire game. We don't see it as often anymore, but for a very long time, this was a staple 3 of in every single hero deck. Jaden also used a lot of Neospacian cards, and many of these are not very good, as you probably can't imagine already, but there were a couple of them that did see play. So Grand Mole was like the first big one. This thing was so cool back in the day as like a really annoying card for many decks to deal with. You could just keep bouncing monsters back to your opponent's hand turn after turn after turn. It was a tech option for many players in a variety of formats, and it saw play for years. It was a real meta contender in a lot of decks. Grand Mole usually wasn't part of the core strategy in a deck, but it was a very popular tech option that was really good because it was a repeatable piece of removal. And after basically everyone laughed at it for years, Neospacian Aqua Dolphin finally became a competitive card in 2018, and even to this day it is still seeing play in pretty much every single warrior deck because Neospace Connector can special summon it right from your deck, and then you can rip a card out of your opponent's hand, usually a hand trap, and then you can continue on with your combo. What's funny about this card though, like I said, for years years, people made fun of this card as being terrible and completely useless, but as we got more and more hand traps, and as we got more and more warrior combo cards, Neospacian Aqua Dolphin suddenly became a very powerful monster. And while most of the Neos fusions never saw any competitive play, Rainbow Neos actually has seen play, especially recently, because you can summon it with Neos Fusion really easily, and that is a really good way to board wipe your opponent. Rainbow Neos has a few different ways to interact with your opponent's cards, and they're all pretty good in certain matchups. Being able to easily summon this thing with Neos Fusion makes it really appealing for a lot of decks. As we all probably know, Jaden fusion summoned a lot in the anime. Pretty much every single duel he played in, he was fusion summoning some monster, but there are a lot of different cards that he played to fusion summon that saw play in the TCG. I already mentioned Fusion Gate, that's a really good card, and the old school Polymerization has seen play in tons of decks, even in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, and he played that, of course. Jaden also played Metamorphosis, a huge card in GOAT format back in 2005, and yeah, maybe he used it to summon Neo Bubbleman, but in the TCG, people didn't really play that card, but Metamorphosis was a very good normal spell, and it is still currently banned, and it has been banned for a very, very long time. Jaden also played Super Polymerization, and what's really cool about this thing is that this card actually saw tons of play in the TCG. You guys probably already know that, but one of the first decks to actually use this card was an Elemental Hero deck. Now, they weren't really summoning the cards that Jaden was summoning with this card, but you could summon cards like Absolute Zero or Nova Master or The Shining using your opponent's monster in your Elemental Hero cards. This card was unbanned in the last few years, and ever since it's been a really popular piece of removal when you're going second, and we'll probably see it in side decks for years. Super Polymerization cannot be responded to, it doesn't target, it doesn't destroy, so it's extremely flexible and can out many monsters that otherwise are very difficult to deal with. The last fusion card I'll mention in today's video is Dark Calling, a card that is commonly played as a one-of in modern hero decks. You can currently search it with Evil Hero Adjusted Gold, and it's really good in that deck for summoning Malicious Bane. That's a very powerful and expensive engine in a lot of hero decks. Next up, we have Dandelion, one of the best plants in the entire game. It is currently banned, by the way, and this was a great card for a long time. I know I've said that about a lot of the cards in today's video, but Jaden played some pretty meta impacting cards. So Dandelion was really good in synchro decks because you could use the Dandelion itself for a synchro summon, and then it brought out two tokens that you could also use for synchro summons. Dandelion was commonly used alongside cards like Lone Fire Blossom and Glow Up Bulb and Spore in a plant engine that saw play in a lot of different decks, and eventually a lot of those cards found their way on the Forbidden and Limited list. More recent players might not remember this card, but Jaden played Necrogardna, a very powerful warrior that could stop an attack, and that might not sound that powerful in the context of modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but back when it was first released, this card was really, really good, and also had a very expensive ultimate rare printing. Necrogardna was played in a lot of decks, especially ones that could mill cards like Lightsworns, and it was a good way to maybe stall your opponent out and hopefully mount a comeback. Spellstriker is another level 3 warrior that saw competitive play that Jaden also used. This card was very good in a variety of combo decks. You could use it for rank 3s or synchro summons or whatever. Spellstriker was a free special summon for a lot of different decks. Maybe it's not as good anymore like many of the cards that I've talked about, but it was good in a lot of strategies, and I myself even played it a few times in decks like Madolche. And this may be surprising to some of you, but Jaden actually played Demise of the Land. Yes, the card that locks you out of the game with Mystic Mine that every single Mystic Mine player plays, Jaden also used in his anime deck. And finally, Jaden played some strong generic trap cards. Mere Force and Solemn Judgment are two that I just wanted to highlight. These cards have seen play in a variety of Yu-Gi-Oh formats over the years, and they were in Jaden's anime deck. Anyway, that is all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thank you once again to NordVPN for sponsoring today's discussion. I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.